Okay. Oh, we're up 10 more, so we're doing well.
Absolutely. So welcome. Are we ready for this?
Ready, ready.
Ready, ready. All right. I hope somebody was. There's somebody out there. Yay. Okay. I have the privilege of introducing a new and what we expect to be a very valuable asset to the New Horizons community, Miss Ginny Price. She's been brought to us by our very own Nikki Riggs, puppy raiser, client, mom, and font of helpful information that she has been. She is our connection to Ms. Price. Jenny is an assistant professor at St. Petersburg College, the College of Veterinary Technology, where she teaches a variety of courses, including small animal breeds and behavior in the AS program, and Advanced Veterinary Behavior in the BAS program. She began teaching at St. Petersburg in 1995. Jenny has a Master of Science degree in psychology that she earned in 2007 from Walden University. And she's a founding member of the Society of Veterinary Behavior Technicians and a charter member of the Academy of Veterinary Behavior Technicians. She earned her veterinary technician specialist in behavior in 2010 by serving on the organizing committee. She earned her fear-free veterinary professional certificate and fear-free level 3 certificate while serving on their advisory board. Jenny is going to talk to us tonight from her font of expertise on behavior and how dogs think. And we're going to get a view into your dog's mind. So here we go. Ms. Price.
Muted. Thank you very much, Laura. I appreciate that. And I'm happy to be here with you. And I want to thank all of you for your help with the service dogs and for helping our communities. And we really appreciate that. We really appreciate what you're doing. And if you want, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And because I have a PowerPoint to show you, so let me go ahead and put that up. And can you all see that? White dots, yes?
Yeah, we got it.
Yes.
Okie dokie. Oh, so now I can't see the chat, of course. So if you have a question, you might be able to just shout it out to me, or we can wait till the end, as you wish. So the first thing I'm talking about today is about developmental periods in dogs. And because the organization breeds dogs, it's important to know what to do with your pregnant bitches and also with the puppies. So even when the bitch is pregnant, stress, if she's quite stressed, that can cause problems with the puppies. So there's two ways that animals can become more anxious or more confident. And one is through genetics and the other is through environmental influences. And learning is one way, but also hormones and things like that from the mother is another way that animals can be changed. And so you can breed fearful puppies through genetics, or if the mother dog is upset. Also malnutrition in utero or anytime during the developmental periods can cause some problems with learning, and that usually has to do with poor myelination, because myelination of the nerves, the myelin is made of fat. So if there's not enough fat, then they can't really lay that down. And that's what makes the information on the nerves travel very quickly. Okay, so the after the puppies are born, until their eyes open, that's considered the neonatal period. And a lot of this information was developed through Scott and Fuller studies in 1965. And so that's a old book that's a classic that still has a lot of relevance because nobody else has really done these studies. And so anyway, the senses that those puppies have are touch, smell, and taste are kind of together all the time because they're related. And also this rhinum, that's this part of the nose right here on the dog. That is the fleshy part. That also detects heat. And we thought that was just in puppies before, but then a study came out recently that said, no, even as adults, they can feel heat with their nose. And that's why it's moist. So that was pretty interesting. So the reflexes that puppies have, and I listed all of them. I typically only talk to the veterinary technicians about suckling and rooting. Flexor dominance just means they're flexing out like this. I mean, they're going like this, and extensor means they're going like this. And veterinarians use that, or you could use that to make sure that they're moving along in their development in a timely manner. And that's like pediatricians use neurological development and movements as a guide to let them know if the animal is, or the baby, and us for puppies, is developing normally or along a regular schedule. So the other reflexes are like rooting, that's looking for the heat, right? Because they have to stay warm at this time. Puppies cannot regulate their own heat, so they cannot thermoregulate, so they have to be with their mom or litter mates to stay warm or in a warm environment. And also they have these other reflexes, basically moving away from things, going right side back up. And of course, the mother, they cannot eliminate on their own. So the mother has to stimulate them by licking, and that's the tactile anal and urinary reflex. So when somebody touches their anus or urinary tract, exterior urinary tract, then the animal will defecate and urinate. Normal. So what they do during this time period is usually nursing, sleeping, and the mother stimulating them. They might move around a little bit and make some vocalizations. And what people need to do during this time period is gently handle them, at least, especially during the first 2 weeks of life. So I'm going to always caution people that sometimes the mother dog doesn't like people to handle their young. So you always want to look out for that. So maybe a good time to do the handling is when the mom's going out for a potty break or something. And it's usually a pretty short time. And I heard from Wendy and Laura when we were talking on the phone that you all already, when you're working with the puppies, are weighing them every day. And this is sufficient for this gentle handling. Really, it's picking them up, putting them on their back, maybe putting them on a cooler surface, which would be the scale, right? And then also just holding them on their back like this. And also you could snuggle up with them because that's fun for you too, right? So that's reinforcing for you when you're doing the little gentle handling with them. The important thing is that we want to have a small stressor, not a big stressor. So we don't want to have like the entire neighborhood come in or all the kids on the block come in and touch the puppies. We want to have a gentle adult that's doing the work here so they know what they're doing. Those kind of stimulation of the puppies can set them up for success for the rest of the developmental periods. Super important. Obviously, we're still going to have effects with genetics and with the environment, but this is one of the environmental effects that can really speed development and help the animal to be able to cope with socialization later on, which is a much larger stressor. What we want to do when we're helping the puppies through their developmental period is to set them up for success by understanding how their brain works and how actually tactile stimulation is setting up their neural system to accept touch later in life. So right now is when their brain is setting up their information going from the nerves that are on the external area of the animal and going to the brain. And so then the animal will understand what's happening to it. All right, so that will help increase the learning of the puppy later on in life and decrease reactivity. And if you're not familiar, reactivity is when the animal has an outsized emotional response to environmental stimuli. So something happens to them and they have a freak out, and they have a long time before they calm down if they're highly reactive. Usually those dogs don't make very good service dogs, and they don't make very good pets.
Ginny?
Yes.
Somebody said, so you recommend ENS?
I don't know what that is. ENS.
Joni?
Help me.
Joni Cornell?
Early neurological stimulation. That's what
Oh,
he was talking
yeah.
about.
Oh,
with
yes,
the
ma'am.
cold and-
Yes, ma'am. Joni, thank you for clarifying that for me. Yes, I don't know all the acronyms, so sometimes, you know, different groups have different, but anyway, yes, I do recommend early neural stimulation, and I think it's super helpful. Just think about how human babies, people used to wear them on their skin, right? And take them around and do different things instead of having them in the crib, right? So we used to do these things with human babies all the time previously. Did you need to go outside? Hang on. Okay. All right. So the transitional developmental period is right after neonatal. So it's after the eyes open. And this is generally when the puppy is learning how to use its senses and its own body a little bit better. So all the rest of the senses come on board. And so that would be adding sight and hearing. And so their eyes and ears open during this time period. Remember that towards the end of this time period, the eyes and the ears will be working better. But what's happening now is the brain is communicating with the cells that are taking in the light and the sound vibrations. And so a dog needs to be, or a puppy needs to be exposed to normal sensory input. So for example, in some puppy mill situations, now I have heard that they like to use shipping crates to house the mom animals and the puppies. And so basically that would be a dark place unless the shipping crate doors open, right? So we want to make sure that these puppies are exposed, and I'm sure your puppies are exposed to normal sensory stimuli, and also different maybe type of textures that they would be walking on when they begin walking. So during this time period, genetic onset and offset of certain behaviors begins. They start having less of these reflexes that I listed on the earlier slide, and more of a voluntary skeletal muscle movement. So it's pretty interesting. They're able to thermoregulate, and they're able to eliminate on their own, and their teeth begin to erupt. So we start to see some of this social weaning that mother dogs will start making it slightly harder to nurse during this time period. And that is also a small stressor that's helping the animal learn how to cope with little stresses in their future. All right, so we need to make sure that we're still doing the gentle handling, and also exposing them to the stimuli, and also making it so they can just move slightly away from their sleeping area so that they can eliminate. And this will help with house training later on. We all know that, like, the puppies that grow up in a pet shop, because they're in a cage all the time, they eliminate in that cage. It's actually more difficult to house train them than dogs that are able to get away from the nest to eliminate. Okay, so I think I went too far. Socialization period, that's 4 to 12 weeks in the dog. And we think actually it's starting to stretch on until 16 weeks. Dogs have a very long socialization period, and it's related to the fact that they've been domesticated for so long. And actually people believe it's thousands and thousands of years, maybe 12,000 years. that they've been domesticated with people. And so we've evolved together through time. And so we also have a very, very long socialization period as humans. But dogs have a shorter, but much longer than cats, which are like 3 to 9 weeks. That's it. Okay, so this is when the puppies are learning to interact with the environment and with other live beings. And what they're learning, they'll start to remember around 7 to 8 weeks. I'm not saying that things that happened to them before this won't change their brain and nervous system. I'm just saying after this time is when they start having actual memories, and they can make associations between people and what the people are doing to them. And for example, at 3 days, we usually do tails, dew claws for remove tails and dew claws for puppies. And if anesthetics aren't used or pain medications, those animals can be affected by the trauma of the pain, but they won't remember who did that. They won't associate with the veterinary hospital or any of the people. But here, if something happened to them at this time, like maybe you closed their tail in a door or something like that, they would remember that it was this doorway, doors are bad, you know, things like that. Okay, so the socialization period is special because that's a time when puppies will have a startle reflex to new stimuli, but then they recover quickly and they can learn to enjoy the environmental stimuli that was presented. So this is the time that we want to start to expose puppies to everything we want them to cope with later in life. While we're exposing them, we have to make sure they're not overwhelmed. So we use body language for that. So we have to make sure that we have a real good handle on dog and puppy body language, so that we can set up positive situations where the puppy can learn to enjoy various stimuli. For example, riding in the car, right? We want to make sure that they would enjoy that. So we want to have perhaps short car rides where the puppy is being held or with somebody that can give them reinforcers or petting or something to help them associate the car with something good. Because you can imagine being put inside a vehicle and then all of a sudden the vehicle starts moving. That's a strange sensation for a being if it has never had that in the past. And why so many cats dislike riding in the car. Let's see, they also sometimes say this is fear imprint time, but remember what I said about the brain finally being able to remember and make associations. Just like in humans where we don't have very many memories before we are 3 or 4, puppies don't have very many memories before they're 7 or 8 weeks of age. There's a lot of ways you can socialize puppies, and the veterinary behaviorists want everyone to know that it is fine to socialize puppies in places where there aren't unvaccinated dogs, as long as the puppies have been started on their vaccines and continue with their vaccines. So perhaps not going to a dog park where you can't really control the situation, and there might be unvaccinated dogs, but obviously having friends' dogs over that the dog is vaccinated and is healthy, and that that dog is friendly to puppies and other dogs, so you can control the situation. Okay, the next period is the juvenile period, and this is as far as Scott and Fuller said, between 12 weeks and 6 months. So this is when the dogs will start really increasing in size. So behaviors that we have reinforced during the socialization period when they were super small and cute, maybe some behaviors that we didn't want them to continue or we didn't even realize we were reinforcing, they will continue to perform those, but they won't be as fun. So for example, if you are reinforcing your tiny 8-week-old Great Dane to jump on you when you come home, and then your Great Dane is now 6 months old and boom, hitting you in the chest, when you come home, it's just not as nice. And the dog, of course, doesn't understand why all of a sudden that behavior is not as fun for you. Let's see. So they're going to increase in size. Also, this is when they have puberty. They start getting sexual hormones. They'll start developing secondary sexual characteristics and exhibit sexual behaviors. Sometimes that's really annoying to humans or embarrassing. They'll be distracted by these hormones because hormones are chemicals your body makes that tells you what to do, right? And so these hormones will be talking basically to the dog's brain and body parts as far as different glands and telling them they should be doing certain things. Like, for example, when females come into estrus, they'll be urinating everywhere, right? They have to urinate more frequently. And so those are kinds of things that we see. They're pretty much teenagers, so they're distracted. And so they might have some lapses in their training, or all of a sudden they might be afraid of something that they weren't afraid of before. And that can be seen, I believe that's related to hormones, because hormones are causing the animal to think in different ways. Usually, if you don't make too big of a deal about the feared items, the dog will come right back and be fine. And basically what I tend to do, and what I've heard recommended from many trainers, is just to continue reinforcing wanted behaviors and to just model confidence. For example, my dog, when I first got her, and when she was going through this period, all of a sudden became really afraid of the trash cans, people would put out on the curb. And so I would just put her on a long line, and then I would go up to the trash can and start talking to the trash can and acting like it was the most fun place in the world to be. And my dog eventually was like, oh, this must be great. And so when she would come over, I would give her, you're so brave, and give her a lot of praise and petting and everything, and help her to understand that that was the great thing to do. If I dragged her up to the trash can, then she would be maybe more afraid, because she was being exposed to something with force, and something that she was really afraid of. Also, this is the time when we usually neuter animals if they are not already neutered, and that is just related to people not wanting them bred. If you did want to breed them, then you would just not neuter them, obviously. So that is the developmental period section, and we can, of course, talk more about ideas and examples when I'm not talking anymore with this up, and I can see you guys, all of you guys. Unless you have something you want to ask me right now.
Okay, Ginny, at 6 months, will they have sufficient bone growth rather than waiting until 12 months?
Yes, so there's many studies out saying to wait. Yes, there's many studies saying to wait. So that if you castrate males early, especially, and if you neuter females as well, I believe, but I know for sure in males, their long bones are longer, right? And you can see many different things happening related to that. So yes, obviously, you could wait until they're totally mature. I know my girlfriend, she does her border collies, she uses them for herding, and she waits until they're 2.
Okay, so for anybody that's new to New Horizons, the females, we have spayed at 6 months.
Yeah.
And the males are done between around 16 to 18 months. That
Yeah.
varies some depending on the dogs coming out of prison, but just so.
Okay, that's great. That's great to know. Yes, it really is. And some of that's dependent on breed. The studies showed breed differences for that, and also what you're going to use the dog for, right? Yeah, it can make a difference in behavior and also in some disease processes. So we can see that, definitely. Good question. I'm glad you brought that up. Thank you. Okay, types of learning, unless we're gonna stop. Okay, so these are the 3 types of learning that are the most important for you to understand, and also for us to discuss. So habituation is a non-associative type of learning where the animal learns to stop responding to stimuli that are meaningless to them. This is the deal. As we age, our brain starts showing us less and less of the things we don't need to know about. Our brain decides. And this is one thing. So for example, say you live on a road with very close to a train track. And when you first move there, the train wakes you up and it's really bothering you. But as time goes on, you notice the train less and less. And it's because the train's not really affecting your life in any way. And so it's not something to fear, and it's not something to love. It's just not meaningful. Another thing would be, say, if you got a new chair and your dog or your puppy was afraid of it initially, but they just noticed that the chair never tried to attack them and it wasn't food. And so they didn't really need to pay attention to the chair anymore. So that's habituation. It's not about making an association, but it's just about learning to stop responding, because if we respond vigilantly to every stimuli in the environment, we'll be exhausted. And so that's an evolutionary type of learning. Okay, so the two associative types of learning that are super important are operant conditioning or operant learning and classical conditioning. And these really go together like this all the time. You never have one without the other. They're always there together. Okay, so they're, even if you're just focusing on operant learning or operant conditioning, classical conditioning is happening at the same time. So that's why I want you to know about them and have them in mind, because when you are reinforcing a behavior to strengthen it, that means you're also doing something else with the animal's emotions. And so operant learning is a behavior contingent on consequences. A signal communicates the behavior is performed, then a known consequence could occur. Okay, so we'll talk about that specifically in just a minute. And classical conditioning is when a novel stimulus predicts a stimulus that causes I can't really see that. Let's see, that causes a response on repeated exposure. Novel stimuli causes the response. So, whoops. Okay. So let's go to the next slide where we're talking about operant conditioning. So operant conditioning or operant learning is about voluntary behaviors being either strengthened or weakened. And so there's going to be an antecedent or a signal that comes before the behavior, and that could be a bunch of things that are happening in the environment, or it could be one thing. So it communicates to the learner which behavior to perform to earn a reinforcer or avoid a punisher. Okay. And then the behavior is used to obtain whatever is wanted. This is why we have operant conditioning or operant learning, is because as complex biological animals, dogs and us and all the living beings are operating on the environment to get what we want and need. So shelter, food, water, mating, obviously to continue, but this is how we get it, by performing behaviors. Okay. And so then right after the behavior, or while the behavior is happening, then the consequences occur to the behavior. And the consequences are actually what cause the behavior to be maintained, not the antecedent. The antecedent is just saying, if you do it now, you can probably get a reinforcer. But the consequence is you did it and you got what you wanted. You did it and you got what you wanted. So that's the really important part. And I'll talk about these symbols afterwards, but that's basically positive reinforcement, negative punishment, positive punishment, and negative reinforcement. And those are all the consequences that can happen after behavior is performed. And we'll talk about that in just a minute. So the consequences are contingent on the behavior. So the behavior causes them, and that's how you get the behavior to be maintained if it's a reinforcer. And the characteristics of the wanted consequences are going to be rate, value, timing, placement. So rate is how much reinforcement or how often the animal is reinforced for the behavior. So for instance, if you're training a dog to sit and then you give them the reinforcer for that, and then you have them sit again and you give them the reinforcer, have them sit, give them the reinforcer, that's a high rate of reinforcement because they're performing the behavior readily and they get reinforced every time. The value is how valuable is the reinforcer to the dog or the puppy. And so some things are obviously more valuable to some puppies than others, and that's related to their genetics and their learning, right? The timing of the consequence is going to be super important. And so the consequence has to occur immediately after the behavior or before they perform another behavior. Excuse me. And where the reinforcer is placed sometimes can be really helpful as far as keeping the animal calm or getting them more excited, right? And generally we try to learn in a low distraction environment and then generalize to other contexts, slowly increasing the distractions. That way we don't overwhelm them. So I also wanted to really focus on antecedent arrangement because this is one area where people tend to neglect. And that's setting up the environmental cues so that the animal is more likely to perform the behavior you want and less likely to perform behaviors you don't want. And so I actually gave the link for this blog, and I took this right off her blog, and we'll talk about this a little bit more. But these are the 3 ways that you can use antecedent arrangement. And of course, you will have this PowerPoint, so you will be able to look at these later and see them. But, you know, I'd rather give you examples later than just read these to you because you can read. I know you can. But these are just different ways that you can set up the environment. So one example for sure that I gave to Wendy and Laura was Emily Laurelham's. She is a trainer with Karen Pryor Academy, and she has this great YouTube channel called Kiko Pup. And I have the link on here for that too, so you can have that. But anyway, she does this great thing with puppies. When the puppy approaches her, she just sets a treat on the floor, and then the puppy will just walk up to her and not jump. So that's a way to set up the environment so the puppy's least likely to jump. Another way you could do that is just put your hand down on the floor, or you could squat down instead of standing up. And that will also help the puppy stay on with all 4 paws on the floor. There's many ways you can do it. You don't always have to use food. And of course, I'm going to mention food most of the time because that's what we use with our dogs when we're training. But I'm not familiar with all your protocols, so I want you to know for sure there's many things that are reinforcing to dogs that we can use. So this slide is about the consequences of operant learning. And so positive just means adding. It just means adding something. So anytime you're adding something, you're doing one of the positive ones that's down there on the bottom right here. Okay, so you're doing one of these if you're adding something. Negative just means we're taking something away. So for these 2, we're taking something away. Reinforcement just means that you're making it more likely that that behavior will happen in the future because it's been reinforced. The more the behavior is reinforced, the more the animal will want to perform that behavior. And there's 2 reasons why. They want to work to earn that reinforcer, and they also, through classical conditioning, feel good about performing the behavior because they earn their reinforcer. Okay, punishment just means that in the future, that behavior is less likely to occur. And that's because something happened that they didn't want. And so they will be less likely to do it in the future. What happened to my mouse? Oh, there we are. Okay. All right, so here are the requirements for using reinforcement. And so this is pretty standard. The reinforcer has to be consistent. So every time the behavior occurs, you have to reinforce it. Doesn't mean you have to use food. You can use many kinds of reinforcers, but it really has to be something that the animal wants, that the puppy wants or the dog wants. Okay, the reinforcement has to be contingent on the behavior, which means the behavior has to cause it. It means you're not just giving bribes. What you're doing is the behavior occurs and then the reinforcer appears. The reinforcement strengthens the behavior. So if a behavior is not strengthened, whatever you're doing is not reinforcement. So often we think something is reinforcing that we're doing with the dog, but it is not actually reinforcing to them. So I have a great example for that. One of the veterinary behaviorists was working with some military people in Texas, and they were working with dogs that were bomb dogs to alert for when they smell bombs. And so what happened was the dogs were doing very well doing the sit to alert for the bombs, but the reinforcer that the people were using was they would pick the dog up very quickly and, you know, snuggle with them and talk to them, and then they would put them down. And the behaviorists noticed that the dogs were like reluctant to sit, even though they were showing all the signs they had smelled the bomb. They were reluctant to sit. And the reason why was because what the people were doing was not reinforcing to the dog. The people enjoyed it, but the dogs were not having fun. Okay, so when they changed the reinforcer, the dog's behavior cleared right up. So, this is just a terminology thing. Rewards aren't reinforcement. Reinforcement is something different. A reinforcement means the behavior is strengthened. Rewards are something nice that we get that make us feel good, but they are not necessarily related to a behavior, and they're not necessarily going to strengthen behaviors in the future. So here are some side effects for using reinforcement. It makes the animal be in a positive emotional state, so that's nice. It associates the teacher with reinforcement, so it bonds the trainee or the learner to the teacher. It encourages the learner to offer other behaviors so you can reinforce them, so that's nice. And sometimes this is the worst side effect. You could by mistake train a behavior you didn't want to train, but you can then retrain it to be the behavior you want. So that's not too bad. It makes the teacher feel good, so that's nice. And it also teaches other people who are watching you train that using reinforcements work, and they'll be more likely to use reinforcers also. Okay, so now we're going to talk about punishment. So the requirements for punishment, and let's remember that punishment is anything that we do after a behavior that makes that behavior less likely to occur in the future. So the punishment has to happen every time the behavior happens. And I don't know about you guys, but sometimes when I get home in the evening, like I'm tired, I'm sitting on the couch just relaxing and maybe having an adult beverage. And I don't want to get up and punish my dog for doing something, and I'll just let it go, right? Anytime you let it go like that, you're actually reinforcing it because they are doing that behavior to get something they want, right? Okay, so contingent, the punishment has to be administered during or immediately after the behavior occurs, before another behavior happens. And that's so that the animal understands that this behavior is causing the punishment. Now, I know it sounds like I'm advocating for punishment, but I'm actually going to come out with some reasons why we don't want to do it. Punishment works, and there's no doubt about it. There's lots of science behind it, but there's reasons we don't really like to do it. Okay, so punishment does weaken behavior. So if you're doing something and you think it's punishment and the behavior is not weakening, it's not punishment for that dog. So for example, many dogs love to be shoved. They love to have their body shoved, and I would go with Labrador retrievers. you know, they jump on you and you shove them down, they probably like, yay, what a cool game. Let's jump on you again. Right? I don't know. I think so. Anyway, here's some punishment side effects, and I have a couple slides of them because there's a lot. So frustration, avoidance. So this is the learner feeling frustration, avoidance, trying to escape the punishment or the punisher, feeling stressed, fear. Agonistic behaviors is showing aggression, types of aggression, growling or snapping at you. Like one time I was doing, when I first started teaching behavior at the college, I used choke chains and I did a pop for a correction and the dog bit my hand. And that's when I said, oh, perhaps I could be using a different technique that wouldn't cause the dog to bite me in front of the students. You know, anyway, if I use punishment with a dog, the dog will associate me with the punishment and say, I'm a silver-haired woman. So maybe the dog will start associating the punishment with other silver-haired women. Okay. It inhibits the learner to offer other behaviors because they become afraid that other behaviors might generate punishments as well. So it can shut them down a little bit. It can temporarily suppress behavior or only suppress the behavior in front of the punisher. Like, you know, your cat doesn't get on the counter when you're home, or your dog doesn't get on the couch when you're home, right? And it, this is what I alluded to earlier, it does strengthen the behavior if it's not punished every time it occurs. Okay, so here are the side effects. Again, it can cause learned helplessness. This is something that Dr. Seligman worked on in the 1970s related to abused women. And so what he was looking at was what happens if you cannot avoid a punishment. So this, if you are in a situation where you are in being exposed to inescapable punishment, you stop offering behaviors. And we see this a lot when we're working with dogs, perhaps, and also cats at the veterinary hospital, when we're holding them down for something like maybe a nail trim or something like that, and they just give up and stop resisting. They're just showing learned helplessness. It's not a low stress situation for them. It's a high stress because they're learning right now that their behavior doesn't work. And that's really what we as biological units use our behavior for, is for getting what we want and need, right? The biggest thing about punishment, I'm going to have to say, besides these others, is it's not training the wanted behavior. And that's what we really want. We want the animals to be performing the behaviors we want. And the only way to do that is by using positive reinforcement. It does reinforce the punisher. So the punisher feels right away that they saw results and they feel really good about it. And so that can be a problem. And the worst thing for me is if you are modeling this in front of a child, they will also do it. So the example I have is, there was at one time, the house next to mine is a rental, and there was a person there that had their Siberian Husky tied to a tree, and he would cry. And so the male that lived there, the adult male, would come out and hit him with the leash in the face. And so one day when I was at home, I saw one of the little children coming out and trying to hit the dog in the face with the leash. And I was very afraid that she would be bitten by the dog. I had to go over there and talk to them. Anyway, that's all I have for behavior, but I wanted to leave you with this slide. And I don't know if that's large enough for you guys to see all the words, but basically, this is a graphic that Susan Friedman and Dr. Susan Friedman and Dr. Fritzler made regarding techniques that we need to use that are the most positive, least intrusive, effective interventions. So these were the ones I talked about as far as in the beginning. Antecedent arrangement is the second one, and positive reinforcement is the third one. The first one is making sure that we're taking care of all the mental and physical needs of the animal first. And this is a big problem in exotics, not usually in dogs too much. But once those needs are being met, then we can set up the environment to help the wanted behaviors occur. And this is about, using baby gates, making sure that things aren't left out on the counter so dogs learn how to counter surf. So those are the kinds of things that we would be doing with antecedent arrangement to make sure that unwanted behaviors don't occur and wanted behaviors do occur. For example, my dog learned to get in the trash. So what I did was it was a flip top garbage. So I just put a cast iron skillet on there, and then she couldn't get in there anymore. So that was managing the environment, right? And that's what antecedent arrangement really is. And as you can see, positive punishment and negative punishment are at the end after a bunch of speed bumps and other obstacles. So I believe that's it. I have classical conditioning. I'm so sorry, I forgot about that one. So classical conditioning can be difficult for some people to understand. It's involuntary, so it's super powerful. But what it is basically we have a novel stimuli that's going to predict a stimulus that causes a response. So for example, we're going to have the dog sit. So we're going to say sit, and they are going to sit, and then we're going to give them the food. When we give them the food, that causes a positive emotional state. So that's the part of it, is the stimulus of giving the food causes the positive emotional state. Them performing the behavior causes the food to come, and that causes the positive emotional state. Okay. I don't really want to get into the temporal aspects with you. This is actually a slide that I used for a kind of advanced class, but I just wanted to put it on there. But classical conditioning is all about reflexes, secretions, and emotions. We're not too interested in training reflexes and secretions, but we would like to work on having our dogs having a positive emotional state, and because they're better learners when they feel good, and they're much more likely to perform the behaviors we want if those behaviors make them feel good. And the thing I want you to take from this is when you're using classical and operant conditioning together and you understand what they're doing, then you will make these behaviors that you want into habits for the animal. And that's what's super important, is they become a habit, and then they're still getting reinforced because the animal feels good. And these are the resources I have for you. These are ones about development. And then this other slide is this is the one about antecedent arrangement. And this is Emily Laurelham's YouTube channel. So you have those links for later. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you, Ginny. Yay. My first question to you is, we often tell raisers that if you're having a problem with your dog in training, now remember, so these are not dogs we've had, a lot of us, since puppies. Some have, but some of them we've gotten at 12 months or 14 months. So it's the whole gamut. But
Right.
we usually tell raisers that if you're having a problem with your dog, it's usually the raiser and not the dog.
Yeah, I would go with that, unless you have a dog that has a genetic problem.
Right.
Or has
yeah.
had some sort of trauma, especially during socialization period, or immediately after that during the juvenile period. The juvenile period is actually when we see most dogs surrendered, not your dogs, but the regular pet dogs. So
Right.
that's pretty common for them to be sent to the shelter when they're juveniles.
Yeah.
And the reasons are the things that I mentioned earlier, but meanwhile, the person can be traumatizing the dog, right?
Right. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. My other
So
question is, I know you talked about a fear period when they're very young. Don't they go through other fear periods before 2 years old, or is it just the one?
no, you can see that anytime,
Okay.
right? But the other time is usually during the juvenile period.
Okay. All right.
is when we see that because of the hormones. I believe, I haven't really seen research on that, so I want to just say that's my opinion. But hormones do cause you to feel weird, right?
Right.
I mean,
Yep.
you know, we all know that, so
Yep.
let's not pretend like that's not happening. So I believe it would be the same for dogs,
Yes,
right?
okay,
When
that's
you're
what
going
we're,
through puberty. Yeah.
yes, yeah,
So I think that's a good thing to think about because they can't really help it. So we wouldn't want to be mad at them or anything. We just want to help support them through that period, and soon they'll be back to their regular self.
right. So what we see very often is people get puppies at 8 weeks and the puppy is perfect until about 5 to 6 months, maybe 7. And then
Yeah.
they start to act like a knucklehead. And they're
Right.
doing things that the person has not seen before. And they're like, oh my God, what's wrong with the dog? What's wrong with me? And so then we just encourage them to continue to reinforce what they've been doing, just more consistently maybe. But we see,
That's perfect.
we
That's
see that
perfect.
time
Yeah.
about approximately 6 to 10 months, somewhere in there.
And
then,
anywhere in there. Yes.
yeah, okay.
And actually you're saying the right thing. And other things you might want to consider there is using more of the antecedent arrangement type stuff. And also be like using maybe a higher value reinforcer, and
Yes.
maybe also shorter training sessions,
Yes.
easier training.
Yep.
Just to get them through that time period. And then typically they start doing much better. Yeah, you see a
So,
leap.
right.
after that.
So
Yeah.
at this point, a lot of times so I think Laura and I talked about this with you. We don't allow our puppies at 8 weeks necessarily to go out like into stores or that type of
Yeah.
thing, because they're not fully, the vaccinations up to 8 weeks have been done, and the raisers are responsible to get the rest of them done.
Mhm.
And we encourage them to go out, and what we consider out is stores and that kind of thing at 16 weeks. But would they be allowed, would they be okay to come to like a training of our dogs that we know are vaccinated, or wouldn't it
That
be?
would be a great idea. That would
Okay.
be a great idea. If you're gonna have them go into stores and stuff as a service dog, they should probably get into that environment as soon as possible, and really before 12 weeks. So you could do that different ways. I will send you the AVSAB, and that's the veterinarians that are interested in behavior that aren't behaviorists. They wrote a position statement on socializing puppies. So I can send that to you so you have that document. And they do recommend that puppies go to these different places because it's less likely they will pick up a disease than that they will have a behavior problem because of the deficit. It's so common to euthanize dogs for behavior problems that all those dogs aren't dying of parvo.
Right.
You know what I'm
Right.
saying?
Yep.
I mean, so definitely I would not recommend dog parks, which I would consider
Right.
to be like the hellscape of dog socialization.
Right. Which
But
is what we say, that we tell
yeah,
them to not,
I wouldn't
know,
go there.
or if
Yeah.
you're gonna go to a dog park, do it when there's nobody else there.
Right.
And you're meeting somebody that you know. And sometimes
Right.
our raisers have a playtime at Laura's church and it's fenced in, and the dogs can go there, and we know
Oh,
it's
that's a
safe.
great idea.
Yeah.
That's a great idea. So, and also I've heard that you can there's an app, and I don't know the name of it, but you can like go rent like a person's fenced in yard and go, yeah.
I
Go
think-
over there with your dog.
I think you're right. Yes. Okay. that's
Yeah.
funny. Yes.
I
Okay.
forget the name. I could get that for you. I just thought of it when you said that, but that's also another way to just get them in different environments and
Yeah.
getting used to different environmental stimuli that might distract them later on when they're doing their job.
Yep.
Yeah. I think it's vital really to get them out and around stuff as soon as you can.
Yeah, well, and one of the reasons that besides the vaccinations, one of the reasons that we don't encourage people to take them like out to stores is because they're not fully house trained yet. And so, and this has
Oh,
happened
right,
to me, I
right.
took like a I don't know, he was probably 16 weeks, just because I tend to go out like as soon as I can.
Right.
And I was in the mall and he had an accident. Now and we always tell people, bring stuff, make sure you have the things
Bring
that you
stuff,
need
yeah,
to
just like
clean
a
up
baby.
after. Yes, just like a baby. So
Good,
it wasn't a big
good.
deal, but that's one of the reasons, because, it
Well,
happens.
that is a good thought. Yeah. Of
And
course, when they're
people-
very small, it's a little tiny, but you guys have bigger dogs, so you have to consider that.
Right. Well, yeah, I mean, our dogs from prison go out, and, we give them a little bit of time. We encourage people, just, you got to get to know your dog. You've got to, if they're just coming out of prison, you want to maybe give them a couple of days at home. Just let them acclimate. So, yeah. Okay. So is there anybody that has any questions for Ginny? This has been, very helpful, and things that we'll continue to talk about. So I just wondered if there's any questions. Hang on. I see something. Oh, Laura.
Well,
Laura,
I just have,
go ahead, Kenny.
I've always been taught and exposed, or my experience has been that the first 8 months of a puppy's life or a dog's life is when his brain is most open to stimuli. And that if there's something that they don't see or experience in that first 8 months, it's really hard to make it normal for them later on. Is that consistent with what your training and knowledge is, or is this something that's an old wives' tale that, some veterinarians told me over the years? So in other words, if a dog lights up at a school bus, it's because in his first 8 months of his life, he'd never seen a school bus. Or
Right.
a person in a yellow hat when he's 3 years old is because he's in that first 8 months, he's never seen a tall person in a yellow hat. Is this
Right. Right. I would say that's really going to be like 12 to 16 weeks. So 4 months instead of 8. Yes, you have to continue the socialization later on, but the actual period where a tiny amount of exposure means a lot is really between that 4 weeks and 12 to 16 weeks. Yeah, yes, they can lose a lot of that if it doesn't continue. I mean, if they were just put in a bedroom and locked in there for the rest of the time, they would lose their socialization, obviously. But at least they would have this beginning part that they had, and you could easily or slowly maybe improve them, which we have done before in dogs that we get at the college. We used to take surrenders, so we used to have a lot of dogs that had weird pasts. But the socialization period, and that's the period that you're talking about, where a very small amount of exposure gives you the huge value, is really 4 weeks to 12 to 16 weeks.
Okay, well, I don't get them until 8 weeks. So
Yeah.
Basically have 2 months to get them to see everything the world has to throw at them, right?
Right.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure I was not way off based on my thinking. Thank you.
But
welcome.
she said, Kenny, don't overwhelm them.
Yes,
There's a
it's
happy
super
medium
important. Yes,
there.
that's super important. You don't overwhelm them. You want to set up the situation so that it's controlled, and you have control over the other animals and the people or whatever's happening. And that also you are watching their body language to make sure that they're not becoming afraid.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I
Yeah.
don't need other dogs until all their shots are done. So that's the
Yeah.
other dog interactions after their 16-week period. They don't get all their shots until then. But I have lots. I'm very careful with all that. I don't spook them.
Right. That's the best way to go, slow and steady, right? And slowly building up their experiences.
Do you
Right.
feel,
I mean, if you were going to do a car ride, you wouldn't take them for 2 hours. You would do like just around the block, right? The first time.
right? Do you feel dogs can overcome things if they weren't exposed to it?
I don't think they'll ever be the same as they could have been if they were exposed, but I think they can be better than they are now.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, we've seen quite a few dogs get much better just with positive reinforcement for them performing behaviors we wanted,
Right.
and bonding with their trainer related to that, and then bonding with other people, because we've had dogs come to the college that wouldn't take food from a person.
So how about dogs who are reactive? And what we see sometimes in our dogs is they're sometimes they're reactive to other dogs, and it's just where they see another dog, they might growl a little bit, or
Mhm.
another dog pops out from a table and they're,
Right.
is that something that can be,
Sure.
we have a couple dogs that we're working that through that with. Is that
Oh,
a
yes,
thing?
you can definitely do that. So the techniques we use for that is desensitization and classical counter conditioning. And so desensitization is where you change the scary stimuli to make it less scary and then slowly increase the intensity. So for that, you would probably have proximity of the dog, size of the dog, maybe type of dog. Maybe they don't like one kind of dog. Like my dogs used to hate chow chows. I don't know what the
Mhm.
deal with that was, but you
Mhm.
know,
Yep. Yep.
they got their thing.
Yep.
And and then you want to slowly increase those variables in intensity over time, watching the dog's body language to make sure they're not responding and they're remaining relaxed. That's desensitization. At the same time, we use classical counter conditioning where we associate the scary stimulus, so say another dog, with food or another type of reinforcer or stimuli that they love, that they want, right? Petting or something,
Mhm.
snuggle with you, being close to you, whatever. So we were talking on the phone about that. So your dog sees another dog and then they look over to you, we're going to reinforce that behavior because we want that check-in.
Yep.
And we want them to be calm enough about the situation of seeing the other dog that they can break eye contact with the dog. Because when I'm very afraid, I'm looking at the scary thing.
Right.
I'm not looking away. I'm looking at the scary. So if
Yep.
you can get them to look away at you and have that be the natural response, that's very nice. So that's how we usually do it.
Can you talk just a little bit about body language?
Okay, so I actually forgot to put the Zoom link videos in there, the links to the Zoom videos in there. So I will send them to you as well as the AVSAB paper on
Okay.
socialization.
Okay.
If I forget, just email me or text me
Okay.
and I will get those to you because those are great resources for all of your people. And also there's a great website called Doggone Safe. And that is also a great website. So it's Zoom, ZOOM, just like these. It's Zoom Room. Those are on YouTube. And you can get those and look at those. And those have great body language for dogs. And there's a cat one too, but you guys don't need that one.
Okay. So doggone safe, DOGGONESAFE.
Yeah. And doggone is one word.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. That's really great. Yes. Just like that.
Okay.
Yes.
All right, good. All right. So maybe that's something next time guys will cover in our next Zoom training. So
Yeah.
anybody else?
Real useful. They have different pages for different behaviors, but they have one whole thing on just how to read the body language and everything.
Yeah. And
It's
I think
for
that's really
regular
important.
people.
Yep.
Yeah. It's for
Yep.
pet owners. So,
Okay.
and there's another resource out there called the Family Dog, or the Family Paw. And I will send that link to you because I forget exactly what it is, but that has resources for people with babies and stuff, but it would also be useful for you, I think.
Okay.
I
All
have
right.
some good resources.
Awesome. Okay. It's 7:09. We don't want to take up any more of your time. Does anybody else have any quick questions for Dr. Price?
Oh, I'm not a doctor.
Oh, okay. Miss Price.
Thank you. I'm not a doctor.
Well, you sounded like one.
I'm just so thankful you guys invited me to come and speak with you, and I'm so proud of what you're doing. I've seen Nikki's dog at school, the one she was working with, and also the dog that she has with her son. I've seen videos of them together, and I can't tell you how much it means to people in the community, what you're doing, and really appreciate what you're doing.
Thank you. And thank you for being willing to come on. And I know that we're going to try and get you on again in the future. And we just appreciate you taking your evening and coming and sharing some really important information with us. I think it will help us be better racers. So
Oh, I
thank
think
you.
that's a great, Margot, that's a great idea that you just posted there in the chat. Just having play dates. Play dates are a great way to get dogs associated with other dogs and having a good time with other dogs and not being afraid of them. Now, are all your dogs the same breed?
Mostly Goldens. We have some labs.
Okay, because if your dogs all look the same, you're gonna need to expose your dogs to dogs that look
Yes.
different.
Yes.
Yeah,
We're
because those
finding
will
that
freak them
out.
out. It's like, because Chow Chows look like their hairs are all standing up,
Yes.
right? Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think, and yeah. So my dogs are fortunate because my husband and I travel in an RV and my dogs see all different types of dogs. But
Right.
I know when I was home, they would see, you know, a small dog or a, you know,
Yes.
and they would be like, oh my God, what is that? Well, it's
What
a
is
dog.
that? I
Yeah.
know, it smells like a dog, but look at it.
So one of my dogs who was a little reactive, I used to take him to the dog park, but I walked outside. We never
Yes.
went in. We walked the
That's
outside of the
great
dog
idea.
park. And
Great idea.
he got to the point where he was like, okay, so what? Big deal. And he had
No.
dogs running up to the fence to him, and he got to the point where he didn't even care. So that was very helpful.
Yeah, so he habituated to them, right? Because they weren't meaningless to his experience.
Yep. Yep.
Right.
Yes.
So that's where habituation comes in. Really nice. You did a great job with that.
Yeah, that was it. He was an interesting
Yeah.
dog. I loved him very much.
Yeah.
So thank you, Jenny. We really appreciate it.
welcome.
Guys, you have an in-person training on Saturday from 10 to 12 at Disney Springs, down by the House of Blues between Cirque du Soleil and I don't know what HOB is, Green Space. What's HOB? Oh, House of Blues. Thank you, Tim. Yes, House of Blues, Green Space. Oh, I think that we've met there before. I think we had our training there the last time. Valerie, when you had Hoover,
Oh my God.
Hoover
Done.
just announced his arrival the entire time.
2 straight hours of I'm
Yes.
here.
I'm here. Look at me. Yes.
I'm looking forward to this time maybe being quieter, maybe.
I'm sure. And Maria and Dale are having to say goodbye to Rummy for the first time. So Maria, know that we're all thinking of you. We've all been there. It's hard. But he's going to go on and do some great training with the inmates. And then when he comes back out, he won't go to you, but you'll be able to see him again. So, and we thank you for being a puppy raiser, because New Horizons couldn't do it without puppy raisers. So Rummy will be just fine. He'll be in very good hands, I promise.
And I'm volunteering to do the drive, so I'll give him lots of love.
Oh, yes. Yay. Good. All right. Oh, nice. Eileen, thank you. And thank you for the thing that was you earlier that asked the question about their bones being grown enough. That was you. Thank you. So thank you guys. I appreciate your time. And it's been recorded. Yay. And so I will put it on the YouTube page, and then I'll share it to the Facebook page. So thank you. Thank you again, Ginny. And guys, we'll see you. You'll see Laura on Saturday at Disney Springs. If anybody has any questions and they want to stay on extra, that's fine. I'm going to stay for a few minutes. That's how you do. Okay, I'm going to stop.